Hello, everyone. My name is Janet Archer. I'm the Chief Executive of Edinburgh Printmakers. And in case you don't already know, Edinburgh Printmakers was established in 1967 as the first open access print studio in Britain. We play a role in connecting artists to studios, workshops and creative spaces nationally and internationally, enabling high quality printmaking and innovation in print practice. And I'm delighted to introduce Series 2 of The Art of Printmaking, which runs for 3 weeks on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. So the focus of this series is SOLACE, which is our first members exhibition at Castle Mills. It's running from 23rd of November to 24th of December. It's produced by Edinburgh Printmakers. And it offers a snapshot of Edinburgh Printmakers members' work on show in galleries 1 and 2. And it celebrates the diversity of work made by members in our new building and at home over the lockdown period. It reflects the solace that people have found in the arts over the past 18 months and the beauty of a form which provides deep satisfaction and joy for both makers and audiences. The pandemic has been a challenging time for forms of artistic production, such as printmaking, which require physical processes. And members have been producing at home using alternative workarounds, as well as returning to the studio when we were able to reopen. With work spanning print on paper, textiles and ceramics, SOLACE culminates our programme running for 2021, and we celebrate the work of our members over the past few years and return of our studio into production mode. All the work is for sale, so if you are looking for Christmas presents, make sure to come and visit. And then a couple of housekeeping points just before I introduce our panel for this evening. So the event is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and website after the event. Please note that the chat is disabled, so you should use the Q&A to post your questions at any point during this discussion, and you'll be answered towards the end of the event. Without further ado, I want to introduce Ingrid Bell and Fiona Maher and Tiffany Martin and Robert Powell. And I'm going to hand over to Tiffany Boyle, who's Edinburgh Printmakers programme producer, who's going to lead everyone through the conversation, and I'll exit from the screen and join towards the end of the event. Tiffany, over to you.
Thanks, Janet. So good evening, everyone. In terms of the structure for our event this evening, it's going to be divided really into a couple of parts. First, we've asked all of our speakers this evening to introduce themselves with a couple of slides on screen so that we can get to know a little bit about their practice and work. And then we're going to, our faces will return to the screen, and we're going to have a kind of a group conversation. I'm going to be asking some questions of everyone. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ingrid, who's going to begin with our little introductions.
Hello, hi. So I'm Ingrid, and I am showing holographs at the Edinburgh Members Show. If you can bring up the first slide of mine, please. Yes, this one. So the one on the right is a holograph, as is the other one, and this is a small series of prints that I made. I got a bit confused with time, actually, during the COVID period, and what was helpful in one way was that I could make the pieces, make the sort of the templates, the stencils for holographs while I was sitting in my tiny room. And I felt like I had a tatami mat or a yoga mat sized space to do all my work during that period of time. So I could collect the materials and start working with that. With the intention then of when the printmakers opened up to go in and to actually print the pieces. And I've been a member of Edinburgh Printmakers for about 20 years now, starting obviously in the old studios at Union Street, and moved to this fantastic building. And usually, well, mostly I have done screen printing, and over the last maybe 5 years on and off, done holographs. I started in the sculpture department when I was at art college, and found that I couldn't really translate my ideas very well with that, but I really like the physicality of printmaking, and I think holographs really suit me at the moment. However, what I made before, if I can have the next slide, please, during the first lockdown, was I found that the hour that was suggested that everybody could go for a walk, I was desperate for that. I was locked up, living with a vulnerable person as well. So I spent that hour going to Blackfoot Hill, actually, which isn't so far away, and walking up and down the hill and collecting the grasses that were there and just breathing in the air, feeling much more connected with nature. And I think also in that way it did allow me to be more reflective on my past and places that I'd been to and places that I'd lived before. And I've sort of dipped in and out of time zones in a way, and countries where I have lived. And if you show the next slide, please. Thank you. So I made these collagraphs that I've designed as 3 on a sort of a long sheet of paper for a collaborative show in Japan. And for me, what is also interesting about that for myself is that I initially went to Japan to study woodblock printmaking. I got a scholarship to go there and live there for 1.5 to 2 years. So that was my base point, really, to go seriously into printmaking and moving away from other forms of art making. And after Japan, I went to Denmark, where I didn't do any printmaking for about 10 years because they didn't have any facilities. So I changed to painting there. But coming back to Edinburgh, yes, I eventually found the printmakers, and I've just used the facilities there ever since, which has been fantastic for me. So talking about like a cyclic experience, really, you know, starting off in Japan and now more recently with the pandemic and a collaboration with others. My work is going back to Japan, but I'm not, but that's okay. So these sort of links that happen. And also I can talk later on about why I made the collagraph that is showing at Edinburgh Printmakers show at the moment. That relates to another period of time. But basically that is my technique and where I've drawn things most recently.
Thanks so much, Ingrid. Could we move on to Fiona now, please?
Hi, I'm Fiona Maher. I'm a printmaker and a sculptor, and I've most recently joined Printmakers since it moved up to the new facilities. I had a significant break in my practice, well, printmaking practice, when I was raising my family of 3. I had been a member previously at Union Street a number of decades ago. And the slides I'm showing are really related to my printmaking that happened during lockdown. I don't think any of us realised how long, certainly the period of lockdown after Christmas last year was going to be. And I very quickly managed to kind of cobble together a temporary printmaking studio in a spare room at home, well, my bedroom come studio as it turned out. And I live in a rural area, so walking was an obvious kind of thing. It's something that I've always enjoyed, and I have a dog. And post-Christmas, it was really cold, and we were going out gathering wood and stuff, and I happened upon this old midden that's related to a kind of old house that's part of the kind of village landscape. And I was raking about while my other half was sawing up logs for the fire, and I found first this broken record, which I was quite intrigued by, wondering why it was there. And then I found several more, as you can see, on the paving stones. And this is the state that we're in when I got them home. And initially I'd been thinking, I don't know what I was going to do with them, but when I cleaned them up, I found obviously the grooves were in really good condition. And that got me thinking about, I think I could make prints out of these. They would make really good intaglio prints. And you can see the print on paper. This is when I got back into the studio at the Printmakers. I was able to combine this with Pianola paper. And the story behind the pianola paper is we had a piano in the house for many, many years, which happened to be a pianola. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had to get rid of it because it was taking up too much room and not so many of the household were playing it. But I rescued a significant number of the pianola rolls, as I do, thinking there might be something that I could do with it in the future. And if I could have the next slide, please, that would be really good. So this is me back in the studio at the Printmakers, and you can see the sort of inking up process with these vinyl records. The thing I love about them is that I can ink up both sides of them, which offers me a kind of real variety of kind of composition and the way that they can kind of interact with each other. And with the pianola paper, I kind of wondered if I could print on it. It's kind of similar to newsprint, but it is stronger because it has to kind of work with a lot of tension within the pianola mechanism. And I was absolutely delighted with the quality of results that I got with that. And the voids in the paper work well with the kind of broken shapes of the records, and kind of just, there's a kind of harking back, obviously, to kind of old technology and a different time. And I think there was a lot of, for me, there was certainly a lot of reminiscence and sort of, I was even thinking back to my childhood and resorting back to comfort food, all those kind of things. So these really resonated for me. And also the kind of the silence in terms of, you know, live music came to a sudden and very drastic halt, and a lot of my family are musicians, and it just was very kind of personal and pertinent, I think, and was a bit of a metaphor for that whole thing that happened to us all. So if I could have the next slide, that would be great, thank you. So the image on the left, it's my left anyway, but you can see it's an almost complete circle. So this was 3 of the records that were superimposed upon each other. And I did actually create this in my home studio. I've got a converted mangle that I use for making kind of proof prints here. And this is what kind of first got me quite excited about the whole process of using the records. And they don't quite make a full circle, which kind of, I think, kind of represents the sort of fragmentation that many of us felt. But I kind of like the reference also to the kind of landscape and water. I started swimming more seriously in the sea during lockdown, but during the Christmas lockdown, I wasn't able to get near the water, and I felt quite a kind of a real dearth, actually, and a real sense of loss from being able to do that. So I think some of the colours are really reflected in that. And then the close-up section just shows you a section of one of the images that I have in the show. And I think there's just a real beauty in the sort of voids, but also the little red lines. These were instructions when you were playing the pianola. You could make the sound go louder or quieter, and the kind of speed and stuff like that. And again, I think there was real resonances for our lives and the sort of changes that happened during lockdown, that kind of real slowing down. And then all of a sudden now things seem to be going at quite a pace that we're kind of getting back to some sort of normality. But it's something that I've just really, really enjoyed working with this whole process and seeing where it goes next. And that's me, I think. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Can we move on to Jenny's slide, please?
Well, hello, I'm Jenny Martin. I am an artist who lives in Portobello. I've been a member of Edinburgh Printmakers for about 25 years, I think. I joined when I left art college and did a screen printing course with Jill Murray, and then kind of came in and started making prints as a kind of partner, really, or a kind of in a parallel practice to my painting, which is a big part of my work as well. And I've been pretty active, kind of, fairly solidly, with a couple of breaks for when I had kids with the Printmakers. So I've got a very long association with it. And at the Printmakers, I only really do screen printing. And the image on the top left of the screen, the Taylor image, is actually the image print that I currently have in the SOLACE exhibition. And it is of a shop which is around the corner from where I work at Leith School of Art. So I teach at Leith School of Art, and I actually teach printmaking there as part of my job. I teach on the foundation course, and I do teach a bit of screen printing. I don't have a particularly big facility, but I teach colograph and lino cut there. But I've never actually done it in my practice. I've only ever really, for my own practice, done screen printing. But lockdown kind of changed that, which was unexpected, but kind of amazing as well. It turned into a really quite an amazing opportunity. So I had agreed to have an exhibition of work that was all based in Leith. It was supposed to be last year. And I was going to do a lot of screen prints, sort of documentary, almost reportage screen prints of shop fronts and places in and around Leith. That was what I'd agreed to do. And so I'd started to make that work in the Printmakers in the new building, which that tailor shop was one of the prints. And I was actually printing in the Printmakers, making, I think, that piece of work the day before lockdown was announced. And I think, like some people have said, nobody really knew how that was going to go and how long it was going to last for. But it became quite obvious that this wasn't going to be changing anytime soon. And so I decided that I really needed to think about my practice. I started painting. Well, I've always had been painting, but I was painting more. But I decided to play about a little bit with lino print and with some holograph in my studio in the back garden. And by complete chance, I'd actually bought myself a little press that some of you may have heard of called an X-Cut Express. It's like a little die cutting machine, which you can buy. You can get them at the range or somewhere like that, places, these sort of crafty things, and it's for making cards, and people put in like little template things, and it kind of cuts out shapes of love hearts and slogans and stuff. Anyway, sort of take away the plate thing and just insert a piece of wood and a blanket and turn it in a little press, a little rolling press. So that's what I did. And so I started to make lino prints and collagraphs on this press, and you can only really print up to A4 size. But I discovered that lino printing was a lot more difficult than I'd thought. When I was teaching the students, you know, I'd be kind of berating them for not doing a very good job or something. And then when I actually started trying to do it myself, I realized that actually it was a lot more difficult than I kind of maybe realized. And so, yeah, it was a learning curve, and it was really good. And anyway, I got really into it and bought myself a press. So I now have a press in my studio, which goes up to A3. So the other two images that you can see on this slide, the block of flats, which happens to be the block of flats over the road from my work at Leith School of Art, and the three cranes, which are quite well known in Albert Dock in Leith, are both lino cut prints that I have made on my A3 press in my studio. And I can tell you, it was a big learning curve, learning to register all those colours. They're both reduction lino prints, and I think they're both about 8 colours. I'm not known in the Printmakers for my lack of colour. I usually do quite often my screen prints have about 12 layers on. And unfortunately, it turns out that the lino cuts are kind of the same, really. And I've had to learn to become much better at registration. If you go on to the next slide, so you can see on this slide, there's a print at the bottom of my cat sleeping in a chair, and that's a lino cut that I printed on my X-Cut Express. It's about A4 size, and I actually put a long bed on the X-Cut so I could print A4 width, but I could print really long. So I did landscapes and things, and they were received really well, and I sold quite a lot, which is what I then used to buy the printing press that I've now got. But in addition to expanding my methods of printmaking, the lockdown forcing me to do some collagraph and some lino, primarily lino, it also forced me to think very carefully about my subject matter, because I had quite a lot of sketchbooks and photographs and stuff for my sort of reportage style of working, which is how I normally work, quite often urban, landscape, that kind of thing. But of course, we weren't allowed to go out. And I'd already done quite a lot of work around Portobello where I live, and I didn't really want to kind of go back and do more of that on my kind of hour walk that I was allowed. So I started to draw the things that were inside my house. And I've got quite a big collection of ceramics, which I've collected for years. And so I decided to start actually making work that was based on them. And that is what you can see here. So I sort of started off by drawing the cat. and then kind of moved on from that, realized there was potential for sort of pattern and color and repetition, which is quite often featuring in my reportage work, that I could actually apply into my these kind of still life, and I've done loads of them now. And so the print on the top left is a reduction, well actually it's a sort of combination, it's a sort of hybrid multi-plate and reduction lino. It was a bit of a kind of nightmare, but anyway, that's a lino print. But the print on the right, which is the kind of coloured one with the checky pattern, I also started doing hand stamping, where I, as a sort of almost like an extension of the lino cut, I got something called Speedy Carve, which is like a sort of pink squashy lino, and you can use it to stamp without a press. So really, lockdown has kind of utterly transformed my work from how I make it, what I make it of, where I do it, and everything. So anyway, that's a little tiny insight into my last 2 years. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Can we hand over to you, Robert?
Hi, yes, so there's 2 pictures in the show that are from a series of work called The Plague Years, which is actually 5 pieces you can see here. I did them at the beginning of the first lockdown as drawings, back when, you know, the kind of societal dread we were all feeling was a bit of a novelty, and it was kind of to take the sting away from that. I'd been reading Norman Con's The Pursuit of the Millennium, which was a book on early modern apocalypse cults, and I'd been saving it up for, you know, a time that seemed appropriate, and it really did start to seem appropriate then. And it was quite comforting, I suppose, to sort of wallow in these modes of drawing that I like to look at, like you know, like looking at Dürer's and Martin Schomburg's kind of apocalypse drawings, and then just to kind of do something like that, but to kind of channel all the kind of worry that I was feeling from reading the news repeatedly. Could I get the next slide, please? And yes, so I've been planning to go into lockdown anyway for kind of personal reasons. I'd had a baby, collecting toilet paper for months and months anyway, just to, you know, deal with that thing. Here I am back when parenting and carrying on an artistic practice seemed like a piece of cake, when I could just plonk them on the table and walk away. So that was quite a good time, really, to be chained to the kitchen table, working there rather than being able to go out to the studio. Could I get the next slide, please? The other piece I have in the show is The Window, which was the first print I did after we got back into the studio for good, hopefully for good. And it sort of comes from really yearning for the studio, I think, being denied it for those many months, because I just wanted to really luxuriate in everything I could do there. There's lots of layers, on more layers than maybe any other print I've done, and most of them have sort of come out as really being invisible to the naked eye, or I mean, I was struggling to find them when I was trying to count them over there. I was like, how many did I do? Yeah, I suppose I've been looking at this called the Adoration of Magi, and above the nativity scene in that, there's this amazing dull yellow kind of acid yellow and this dull acid green, and they kind of shimmer back and forth and bounce back and forth. And I was trying to emulate that, maybe not as successfully as Bosch, of course, but trying to get something like that into the print. And also that sort of composition, which I find very attractive when you're looking into a space that's looking into another space. So there's a kind of surrogacy of viewer there. You're imagining being someone else looking out, rather than, you know, looking out into a space yourself. And of course, we've all done a lot of looking out windows during lockdown. That seemed quite appropriate. So yeah, so I think in their own way, all these pictures are kind of about solace of some form or another. I mean, and maybe that's what we can only find solace in, these things like color and line and humor, I suppose, and being able to fashion something against the dread, and kind of reckon with the dread face on, but slightly askance in that way. Thanks. That's me.
Thanks, Robert. I've really enjoyed hearing everyone introduce themselves. I'm almost sorry to interrupt and start to ask questions. But all of the questions I'm gonna ask, I want to pose to the group. So I guess we can figure out who wants to go first with answering. But the first question that I had for everyone was that in some of the information shared in advance of the selection process for the member show, something that was an affinity between you all was that there seemed to be quite a clear, distinct moment where you first encountered printmaking, or where printmaking kind of became intertwined in your practice. And I wondered if you would be open to sharing something about that.
Yeah, I can go first if you want. Well, as I said, I started when I left. I did a bit of printmaking first year and didn't really like it. It was etching, and I didn't like it because it wasn't very colourful, and I like colour. And then when I was in my 5th year, I did a 5-year course. I won a prize for printmaking, which was actually a giant it was a massive photocopy that I'd done, triptych. And I won this prize for printmaking, which took me by surprise. And then when I graduated, they offered me a printmaking postgraduate at the Art College, and I thought they were a bit bonkers, to be honest, and I just thought they were mad. And I said no, and I said I wanted a painting postgraduate, which that's what I got, and that's what I did. I did a painting postgraduate at the Art College, and then I left and joined the Printmakers and completely got into printmaking, and look back now and think they probably saw something in my work that they recognized that would work. I just thought they were kind of ridiculous tutors who knew nothing, because I was an idiot. You know, I was a sort of young student and didn't have a clue. But that's probably, you know, I kind of look back now and think, I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually accepted the printmaking postgraduate. I mean, I'm glad I didn't, but I think there was always that sort of tension or dichotomy in my work, I think.
Yeah, sometimes we meander towards where we're supposed to go. So
yeah, I think, sorry,
Ingrid, carry on.
No, I was going to say, yes, I think when a bit like you, Joan, you know, when I won the scholarship to go to Japan to do woodblock printmaking, I'd been really interested in lots of things Japanese and was doing kendo, martial arts and stuff. And it was just mind-blowing at the time. That, you know, it was in the early 80s, so everything was so different and I was different to them. But getting a printmaking scholarship, I think, identified me for myself in a way as a printmaker. And when I didn't have it, when I was living in Denmark and periodically in Spain, when it wasn't accessible to me and I was doing other things, it's not that I missed it because I couldn't translate it into painting with colour and you know, just keeping going the practice in a way. But I think when I came back when I arrived in Edinburgh, I hadn't lived there before, but when I arrived here over 20 years ago now, having the printmakers was just this fantastic community place where I could get back into printmaking again, and I realised how much I missed it. And it's just a place that's really held me, because I haven't had a studio of my own, and I work as a therapist. So having a place to go to with a community and the accessibility has just always been fantastic. Really sustained me over the years of living here in Edinburgh.
Yeah, I think printmaking sort of took me by surprise as well. Really, I hadn't really intended on doing it at college, but then every time I did something that wasn't a print, I thought, oh, that would have looked better if it was a print, and there's full of, every time I had that regret. I suppose I learned the lesson that I really should just be making more print. Although what I've shown is lithographs, I came to printmaking through etching, which yes, Jenny says is very monochromatic, which I quite like. It's very viscous and gooey and full of shadow, and I usually put a bit of watercolor on that to make it slightly colorful but more subdued. I've been getting into lithography in the last couple of years, since 2016, I think, or 2015, which is a great way of being a bit brighter and working in a different way. I can't really handle screen printing, because it's that kind of, that kind of muscular process. I mean, maybe I'm just not very muscular, but it's the kind of coordinated thing that I don't seem to be able to do at speed. Lithography is about as fast as I can do.
I think screen printers are the punks of the printmaking world. We're there with our power hoses and our noisy screen press beds, while the lithographers are wafting their paddles around. So yeah.
Interestingly, it was screen printing that I first engaged with as a young person. I was in 6th year at high school, and under the days of the old region, Lothian region, schools were offered the opportunity to give 2 students from each school in the region the opportunity to go to the printmakers, when it was still where the Fruit Market Gallery is, so it's quite a long time ago. And my experience of that, we had a full week of getting ourselves in there and back out, and we worked with, there's a guy called Ivan Polly that I remember in particular, and it was the first time I really remember being treated like an artist and being taken seriously, and meeting like-minded young people. And I made good friends there, actually, some of them that went up to college with me. I studied at ECA. And then at college, I discovered printmaking big time. And etching in particular was what just really fired me up, so much so that 2 of us fought the head of department to be able to complete our degree in printmaking. We were the first 2 students to be allowed to do that, which just was quite magical. I didn't get a postgraduate, but I felt like I had it. Because it was a postgrad school down in Inverleith, and that was me kind of hooked. I love the physicality of it. I mean, any kind of printmaking technique, I think I just love that physicality. And I think Janet mentioned something in the sort of warm-up about the sort of democracy, and I love the fact that, you know, you could make multitudes of the same thing, and it became very accessible. But like full circle, I'm now running Print Club for young people at the Printmakers, and just kind of hopefully inspiring and firing that imagination and giving them access to those techniques. It feels quite a privileged position to be in.
Thanks, everyone. So it's interesting because we've covered some of the ground about those overlaps, and another thing that kind of shone through in all of that information was shared, that everyone seemed to everyone or their inner child was really taken by the transformation that happens in printmaking. So kind of gathering together different disparate elements, and then together they become more than the sum of their parts. There's a kind of magic to some of those processes, or I mean, one of Fiona's slides said the big reveal. So, you know, it's those moments, you know, like developing a photograph as well, where suddenly something comes off all your labor. And I wondered if you could all talk about how the various ways in which you feel that to be true, or feel that to be something that's present in your making.
I like this. Go on, Fiona.
No, I think for me, that's part and parcel of the magic of the whole printmaking experience. There's so many things that, you know, you've got no control over, which is one of the things that I do love about the whole printmaking process. You know, you're just never quite sure how it's going to turn out. And that kind of control, lack of control is something, you know, when you peel that paper back, or, you know, finish the last colour on something, yeah, that is, I still get a bit of, you know, electricity through the veins, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's it.
But I think that's quite interesting, because I mean, I obviously teach it at my work, and we teach holograph. And the thing about holograph very often is you just can't tell what you're going to get from the plate. And, you know, it's much about the plate as it is about the inking. You know, it's all kind of related, you know, that it's not just, you don't just get what's on your plate, how you ink it up. It's kind of like painting. And it's incredible when you see the students, when they peel it back, they suddenly realize that they don't have control. And actually, sometimes that's better than when they do have control. And I think for me, that's always been a big thing. And I took up screen printing because I wanted to kind of free myself up. But actually, over 20 years of doing screen printing, I've become quite good at it. And almost that becomes a bit of a problem, because you don't get as many unexpected results. And I think that's what's been so good about progressing into different print media, is that I've been able to slightly lose control again and get unexpected stuff. I think that is the best thing. I totally agree with you, Fiona. It's really exciting.
Yes, I've always felt that, you know, from the first time I ever, as you said, the big reveal, I like that, I'm going to use that, for me, it's just like a Christmas present or a gift, you know. It's like, wow, what am I going to get? And it's just like amazing. And every single time, so I could do like a million prints, and I always get that feeling, which is wonderful. But it's also, I think, a little bit, it's like alchemy. You know, you start off with, well, the collagraphs, which I was doing, and the materials, you know, they're like everyday materials, bits of cardboard and stuff like that. They can just gather together. You don't have to go anywhere. It's just accessible, which is another great thing about it. And then creating shapes, and then building up a plate and putting it down, and just not, you know, and then it becomes something else. And these collagraphs are the ones that I've done most recently, are a little bit different in that I didn't have static plates. I had a base, and then I inked up. And you're absolutely right, Jenny, and the inking up is, you know, I learned a lot in that, you know, putting too much extender in, you just get nothing. So that in itself was a whole process. And then and then what I did was I worked at the actual printing bed. So rather than having a prepared plate that would be repeated, I just worked and did it very sort of spontaneously in a way, with like tweezers, and placed the thing in a design. And then of course it's always reverse, isn't it, when you take it off? So it's, and I think that always surprises me as well. So it was that whole thing of, it was more painterly, I think, but it was also felt slightly sculptural because of the actual pieces and the embedding in the paper. Yeah, so that was very different. I think it's a slightly different way of doing collagraphs, and that's why there's no edition of it either. All of them are just one-offs. So I guess in that way it's like painting, because it's just a one-off. But I really feel it is like an alchemical process. You just start with one thing and you get something very, very different.
Yeah, it's great, because I suppose every every time it surprises you, and it's often so much better than what you intended you looked at. I wish I'd thought that, but luckily, you know, the process has for you. And it also, I mean, it's not just forgiving, it actually makes something better out of what you've put in. I mean, you do this really rubbish little drawing on an etching plate and you print it and then, wow, that's not so rubbish anymore. And so that's, yeah, I can recommend printmaking to anyone, really.
Absolutely.
All converts here. I still have a couple more questions, but I did want to just flag up to our audience that if you want to start typing in questions, there's the little Q&A tab at the bottom. So you can start to type questions there that we'll be picking out later on. But to stay with my questions. One of the things, I know that Fiona and Jenny, you've mentioned that you teach in various ways that kind of infiltrates your practice, but one of the things that I hadn't quite appreciated until working on the members show was how many members have taught other members processes, and there seems to be a lot of kind of circularity in the studio. And I was wondering, I mean, I'm kind of more asking you to help me shed a light, or just to kind of, I mean, it feels like that must be so integral to the community in the studio, that kind of kinship that seems to be there. You know, it feels like there's a lot of, even if it's not formal teachings, there's a lot of helping, sharing skills. It seems to be something that's kind of part and parcel of what it means to be in the studio together.
I think that is, I think, because it's an open shared studio as well, you can see people working in different disciplines. And I always find that really interesting. I always go for a wee wander when I'm, particularly if you've got a bit in a process, you're just like, it is really interesting to see what people are doing, you know. And screen printing seems to be, I just finding it more and more intriguing. It's something that I've been resisting for a long time, despite it being the first, I know, despite it being the first process I engaged with. And now I'm feeling very, very strongly pulled towards it. It's like a wee magnet at the other end of the studio. And I'm definitely going to end up there at some point.
Join the punks. Join the punks in the screen printing department. It's the way to go. I've never done lithography, and I've a lot of folk always say I should try it, because of the kind of layers and the kind of washy marks that I use in my screen printing, and I feel like I need to now, because of this, the only kind of main method that I've not really tried. And whenever I try and describe it to the students, I just kind of start and then eventually go, it's kind of like magic, really. And you know, so I'd love to try it. I think it's quite funny in the new workshop that Alistair has moved it quite far away, like furthest away from the screen printing department, whereas previously it used to be right next to it. And I'm sure the racket we all used to make used to get right up every lithographer's nose. And so yeah, I'm going to give that a try, I think. And I've always found everyone really helpful. When I was a first new member, people were very helpful and very welcoming. I actually didn't, because I didn't have a communal studio. I've always worked at home. So I joined the Printmakers really to meet people, not to start a practice as a printmaker. And it's really worked. I know I've got a lot of friends that I've made through the printmaking kind of practice that I've done, and I've met at the Printmakers. And I think everyone is really helpful and friendly. And you kind of learn stuff. You see people doing something and you think, oh, I wonder if I might try that. I might try embossing, or I might try, you know, using metallic ink or, and it's, you know, it's really helpful. And now I'm the person helping people who come in, because I kind of, you know, I've been there for such a long time.
I think for me, it was going to the workshops actually that were put on that were really helpful. It was Gillian who did a lot of the workshops that I've been to, and sort of learning techniques. Actually, I've been all around learning techniques. I always feel like if I learn this technique, maybe I'll get, you know, this amazing. So I've tried them all. Actually, at Edinburgh, I have not tried lithography. I have done works in lithography, but not here in Edinburgh for some reason. But the workshops have been brilliant, you know, for techniques, and the like Gillian and Lena mostly it was that I have learned from are wonderful artists in their own right, and very generous. So that has been very helpful. And of course at the workshops you meet other people and you're all just practicing. So there's a lot of talk and sharing of what the possibilities are within an area, you know, like I don't know, Toyoba prints, even if that is how you pronounce them, you know, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really a culture, like a yogurt's a culture, you know, there's fizzing going on all over the place, and it's really infectious. When I first joined Printmakers in 2008, so 13 years ago, I remember coming in and I was very nervous that I'd be found out, you know, as someone that didn't really know what they were doing, and it's that kind of like very kind of earnest, you know, rubbing away at my plate, so glancing around over my shoulder, and I kind of realized how capable everyone is now of being kind of relaxed and able to discuss mistakes and learn from each other's mistakes. And I mean, the mistakes keep happening however long and however much I do it, and there's, I mean, talking about surprises, it's surprising that there's always a different mistake or a different kind of unintended consequence, for better or worse, that comes out of something. And yeah, some of those mistakes can be quite glorious in their eventual effect.
So I wanted to ask everyone, we've already kind of touched a little bit on your experience of making during lockdown and some of the workarounds and some of the ways in which that affected production, kind of positive and negative. But one of the things I was thinking when I was looking at all of your work is that something that's also kind of present, perhaps because of lockdown, is place. So whether that's places that you're exploring, your immediate surroundings, or I felt, Robert, also for yours, it was like being transported to another place. And I wondered if that was something that you felt kind of predated your lockdown work, or if that's something that's a more recent kind of occurrence in your practice.
Well, the place for me has always been important, with having spent years in different places, and also it took me back to my childhood, where I grew up with my grandmother in Austria in my early years, and so that has had an influence on me, and also maybe becoming a grandmother myself and thinking about that, you know, and having that sort of reflective time now in lockdown. So the piece I made is very much thinking about not so much folklore, but accessibility again of materials, and thinking about folk art and East European folk art. So it's also to have this like Hungarian connection there, so that sort of East European folk art came to mind as a place and time for me, and revisiting that. And also thinking about northern and old botanical flower paintings, the Dutch flower paintings as well. So these sort of links between different places and history for me has been important. And again, the different cultures that I've lived in at various times have influenced my imagery, but there've also been poignant times like in my life cycle, I guess. So it's dipping in, and I found that I just did this like or that this is what I do, is to dip in and out of times and place and what's important and the motives there. And it feels a little bit random sometimes, you know, suddenly I'm interested in this, I don't know, Spanish artist or this Danish one or wherever, and or something to do about the culture. So yeah, so culturally, I guess I went back to early childhood and thinking about that, and with people, with life being so precarious actually in COVID as well, and knowing people that have died and your own mortality and that, and thinking about childhood and old age and where you are. So yeah, so place and time have always featured, not recognisably so, I don't think, you know, in what I produce, but it's something that comes with me in whatever I am doing. Yeah, sometimes it's more obvious, sometimes it's less so, and sometimes I think maybe nobody even knows that because it's not so obvious, you know. But yeah, so I'm thinking about that, you know, do I need to make it obvious? Don't I? Should it be subtle? What is it? But it is always there, those two things that we've spoken about. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think the place thing's quite interesting for me. I mean, I've lived in the same house now for 35 years, and we made a very deliberate decision to move here because it's in the countryside and there's straight out the door, there's access to walks, and just amazing walks. But life gets busy, you know. I've had a family of 3. There's different times where you're just, it's almost like a dormitory, you know, you sleep in your house basically, that's it. And just before lockdown, I had decided that I was going to kind of calm things down a bit and give up some stuff, take a bit more time to myself. Careful what you wish for. 2 weeks later, I didn't have a baby, Robert. I wished for some quieter time and I got it. And I've been able to explore my surroundings again, you know, from a different perspective, a different age, and having had the experience of living in this place. I moved around a lot with my family when I was a child, so living in the one place for such a long time, and seeing it, and it's changed a lot over many decades, well, 3 decades. And I've just really appreciate where I live again, and reconnected with the whole place, which has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I have 2 lovely cafes in the village, which we never had before, so I've been able to connect with people socially. I've done a sort of community, a participative art project over the whole of 2021, which will come to an end at the end of this year. So it's been really nice to bring people to my own place and for them to see it and see it through their eyes as well, which has been really interesting, you know, because sometimes you don't always appreciate what's on your doorstep. And again, that whole thing of just finding stuff, which is where the records have come from, which is something, well, I wouldn't have done anything like that had it not been for lockdown, and I would have crunched over the records probably under normal circumstances and just left them to get broken up into other fragments. So yeah, I think that space and place and time thing, I think, has been really important over lockdown and coming out of it.
I think Janet's coming in to join us as well. Hi, Janet.
Hello. It's just been amazing listening to you talk, and actually what it makes me reflect on is just the importance of these kinds of conversations in the time that we're in. At the very beginning of the lockdown, I listened to an event with Gavin Francis, the physician and author from Scotland, who just talked about the fact that it's going to take years and decades before we really process everything that's happened to us in this period. And it's, you know, it's interesting that through the medium of art making and printmaking, we can reflect on these things in a not dispassionate way, but in a way where we can make sense of them, which is, I think, really valuable and important. I was really taken by, Robert, you said we've all been doing a lot of looking out of windows during the lockdown, and that you've been able to find solace in colour and light and humour, and being able to fashion something against the dread and being able to face the dread. And it strikes me that all of your practice has added a little bit of that into your lives and into our lives. And it makes me also think about the work that I did in the late noughties when I was researching well-being, and I discovered something called the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which was formulated by an institution called the New Economics Foundation. And they talk about the importance of connecting and being active and taking notice and keeping learning and giving as being sort of key pillars that can keep us going in difficult times and contribute to our mental health. So yes, there's lots in this conversation which, beyond the art of printmaking, I would say, which has been really fascinating. But most of all, it's been amazing to hear you talk about your practice, and I'm loving learning about the different forms of printmaking. So thank you hugely for talking about your work in such a precise and considered way. I suppose I'm thinking that still, so although we're all enthusiastic about printmaking, there are still some people who haven't quite taken that step and just elected to sort of choose a route of exploring printmaking. What would you all say to someone who's in that place where they're considering printmaking, investigating printmaking, but they're not quite sure? What would be your advice?
I recommend printmaking all the time. Always telling people to join the printmakers for a lot of different reasons. I think it's obviously a great way of meeting people and meeting other artists and seeing a whole range of different work, which is some of which might be very similar to your work, some of which might be very, very different. I think all of that is fantastic. It's a very wide organisation, and I think that's one of the really brilliant things about the members show, is it completely showcases that absolute breadth of work, from really quite small, almost sort of domestic scale work to much, much bigger work that might be really ambitious and very conceptual. So I think there's a place for everybody at the printmakers, whether they're professionally trained artists or whether they're a keen amateur, actually. And I think that it's really important. I think it's a really important part of the printmakers' mission and vision and sort of core purpose, really. So I always encourage people to come to printmakers. And if they're an experienced printmaker, I would say that they need to do one-to-one. But a lot of folk I recommend they do courses. It's a great place to train, and it's exciting, and you always learn something new. So yeah, I would hope to kind of carry people away with my enthusiasm if they were feeling a bit unsure about going, maybe kind of mow them down and force them to. But yeah, I recommend it a lot.
I was going to say to go to the to a workshop, because over the weekend where people maybe have a little bit more time. And the weekend courses are excellent, and there are so many and varied. So you could just tap into lots of different weekend courses to get a taste of where you might find your place in terms of what technique you would like best. And there's also, I think, an open day that they used to have. And that was excellent, where you come in and the kids come in and you can have a go at stuff and loads of people are around to talk. That's a great way, I think, of bringing people in, having an open studios. And where you can just test out. Because I think it can be scary if you feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. But a workshop is a great way to enter into something, because you're already going to be with a group of people who you can assume don't know anything, like yourself maybe. Or even if you do know something, maybe you just want a refresher course or something like that.
Yeah, just have a go with it. I mean, I do a lot of workshops out in the community. And a lot of people that come along to that have had no experience of printmaking whatsoever. And, you pique their interest and then you point them in the direction of printmakers and tell them there's a whole raft of stuff going on there as well. But I'm always blown away by what people produce, even in a short 2-hour taster workshop as well. And just seeing that little flame lit. And like you're saying, Jenny, just that, people's and your own sort of enthusiasm for it, you hope kind of through a process of almost not osmosis, but you know, just and seeing what other people are doing when you're in a kind of group experience as well, I think just helps to kind of fire that enthusiasm a wee bit more. I think, yeah, just give it a go. Don't be scared. Get messy.
I think to someone uncertain about making prints or looking at prints, I'd say, well, just look at them, because they look brilliant. They look better than just about anything else, and so that would be argument enough. I suppose they kind of speak for themselves in their own very kind of particular way. There's nothing else that is quite like each process, and then each practitioner does that process in their own way. And yeah, I'm most astonished by a show like SOLACE, where I think about one process, and I think that's how to do it, because that's how I do it. And then you see this whole kind of array of other people doing it in completely different ways. There's a lot of versatility there, and that's refreshing, and that's full of solace, really.
Indeed. And off you go, Jenny.
No, I was just going to say, absolutely, I totally agree.
Brilliant. So I could now talk to you for another hour. However, we have got to the end of our hour. So it's down to me to say thank you hugely to Ingrid and Robert and Fiona and Jenny for participating in this panel. It's been a really interesting conversation. So, and do come and see the work. To our audience. Do come and see the show, which is on until just before Christmas. And I also want to say thank you to Tiffany for facilitating this conversation so beautifully. Big thanks from me. And I also want to introduce next week's event before we sign off. So next week on the 8th of December at 5 o'clock, we'll be able to hear Fiona Maher, Alistair Conroy, Anupa Gardner and Paul Freneau in conversation with Tiffany Boyle. So thank you all and good night. Enjoy the rest of your evening.